When I come here and I talk to you guys about things, there are some things that I know deep down. Like I have lived them, I've experienced them. I'm much older than I appear. um, I've lived through a lot of things, and I've had a very filled life with experiences, and I have a lust for knowledge. So I have a tendency to study a lot of different topics and a lot of different things. And my videos are not always based on things that I know within myself, like things that I have experienced. They're things that spirit is communicating to me. I don't get on here with a deck of tarot cards and do readings and tell the collective what they want to hear. A lot of people tell people what they want to hear. I tell what spirit, what my guides, what my guardian is communicating to me. And we have very long conversations about things. And though it doesn't look like a lot of reading videos, that is what I am expressing. But one thing I do know a whole lot about is grief. And I think I was born to experience large amounts of grief. And the reason why I say that is because if you have any information about astrology, or you know anything about astrology, I have a stellium. I have a couple stelliums, actually. I have sun and moon conjunct in the 8th house. And I have a small stellium in the 9th house, which is Mars, Venus, and Mercury. And there are other indicators within my chart that show that when I incarnated into this life, I was going to deal with a great deal of death. And I have dealt with a great deal of death. I have dealt with so much death that somewhere around 25-ish, I sat down with a pen and a piece of paper, a book, and I went through and I wrote down every person that I knew who had died at that point. And the list was 120 plus people at the age of like 25, 26, somewhere right in there. I had a very, very large family, and all of them, with the exception of a few, maybe 5, 6, have passed away. And by large family, I mean aunts, uncles, grandparents, and then there were divorces, and there were steps that I considered to be family. So I had, mother side, father side, stepfather's side. There were many. And as a child, I spent a lot of time, was very outdoors. I was always outside. I grew up on the beach, and I was always outside playing, and I grew up in a fairly populated area, although it was considered a small town. So I knew, and I grew up in this area my whole life. I knew a lot of people. beyond my family. And some very tragic things happened in my life. Like one boy that I went to school with, um, he committed suicide by gun on the beach. Another boy that I know, who was actually a couple of years ahead of me, committed suicide by hanging himself in a very public place. I don't want to get into like too many details, but I've seen the spectrum. I've seen people that I know personally, people that I dated, people that were friends with, people that I interacted on a daily basis or a weekly basis, um, family, friends. These people died because of various different reasons. I mean, everybody from sudden death that you didn't expect to someone who was murdered. I have I've had this my whole life. I remember when I was in school, I had a girlfriend who decided to ditch school one day, and she wanted to go up to the mountains to the hot springs and uh, just spend the day. She was kind of having a bad day, I guess you could say. She was just having a bad day and she just wanted to get away. And I saw her right before she left, and she told me that she was going and she was, experiencing some things, and she was leaving the school. And she ended up being murdered. Uh, she hitchhiked to get to the place where she was going. We were in, I think, junior high at that time, so she didn't drive. She um, hitchhiked to get there, and whoever it was that picked her up killed her. Um, I have known many law enforcement professionals. I've known who have died in the line of duty. I've known firefighters who have died in the line of duty. Like I said, I've spent my life in a fairly constant state of grief, I would say. And we're in this time right now where a lot of people are experiencing grief, and a lot of people who have not experienced grief in the past are experiencing large amounts of grief because of things that are happening in our world and in society today. And that can be anything from, I'm not even going to say the reasons, but you guys know. You open up the news, it can be, a variety of reasons, but it just seems like there are a lot of people that are dying at a fairly rapid pace these days. And a lot of people who are not comfortable with grief or have not dealt with grief in the past are experiencing huge amounts of grief. And I feel I feel for them. I'm telling you, I feel for every one of you who have experienced this grief. And I want to give everybody a big hug and tell you that it's going to be okay. I do believe, personally, after all the grief that I've experienced, you would think I would be a very hardened individual and I would be very angry. I'm not. I believe that we choose our path. Now, that does not mean that it's written in stone and that there aren't variables throughout the entire life process. But I do believe that we choose many things along our life path. In fact, I believe we are choosing things constantly. We are evaluating. Our soul does not need to sleep. Our body needs to sleep. And when our body is resting, our soul is going home and working through our life experience and other people's life experience and how we connect to those other people. So I believe that we are co-creating with our spiritual team and God and the universe in general all the time. And I think that we did this when we came into this life. We picked our parents, we picked our grandparents, we picked the path that we were going to go on. We picked everything. And a lot of people have a hard time with that concept. That's okay. You don't have to believe everything that I believe. I'm just sharing with you what I know or what I believe. And getting back to the whole grief thing, because I believe that we have chosen the experiences and the path that we have taken in life, I think that helps me deal with grief a little bit better than the average person, because I am taking full responsibility for whatever the experience is and how that experience affects me. That is my life from beginning to end. And I believe it is my job to assist people in seeing that you are creating a lot of the things that you're experiencing. And through that creating, you are, if you can adopt that philosophy, that view of the world, you will be able to deal with a lot of things that you never thought you would be able to deal with in the past. And you will be able to heal from them much faster and much easier when you put yourself in a place of taking responsibility, not blaming some person or blaming some situation or blaming God or the angels or whoever you want to blame. There is no healing in blaming anything on anybody. So I have come into this life with a path of dealing with a great deal of grief. And I believe that part of the reason for that happening is because we are going into a period of time where there's going to be a great deal of grief. And people are going to experience a great deal of grief. And I believe that I have dealt with a ton of grief to assist you in your grief journey that is happening now and could very well happen on a deeper level in the future. As we get older, just naturally, we will experience a lot of grief. But there's a lot of people I know people who are in their 50s and 60s who really haven't dealt with a whole lot of grief. They have large families, nobody's really died, maybe they had one or two people. I have had massive amounts of grief in my life. And I believe that one of my things in life is helping other people deal with the grief that they will experience as they get older and in the times that we're living. And the times that we're living is very uncertain and very sadly, there will be grief coming. So I just wanted to say that there is no magic cure for grief. I apologize. I don't have anything that I can say to you that is like a magic pill for grief. Grief is horrible. It is an absolutely devastating emotion that there is no cure for. There is no magic pill. It doesn't go away until it's time for it to go away. And it takes a long time for it to go away. And you don't generally have any control over your experience with grief, the level of grief, because there are levels to grief. There is a depth to grief, depending on how much time you spent with the person, how active they were in your life, or the animal. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be many things. It can be, but generally speaking, the grief that I'm talking about is human, animal, maybe a place that you used to hang out or you used to love, place that you have a lot of memories. If it experiences some natural disaster or gets blown up or something happens to that place, you could experience grief. There's different grief, there's different intensities of grief, and there are different things that create grief. But the thing that is probably most important to remember is there is no such thing as cures for grief. I think that is between you and God, you and your angels. Like I said, depends on, different circumstances in your life, your relation to this person. If it was your husband or your wife and you've spent your entire life married to this person and they've always been there and then they pass away for whatever reason, that is a very severe grief, because this is somebody that you have had a very close relationship with. They're pretty much like your right arm. So that level of grief is going to be a lot more than, another situation with grief. And you may experience grief just reading the newspaper or hearing about something that has happened. I will go through this. I will read about something. It could be something that's happened to a person, and I have a period of grief after reading this situation and thinking about this person and feeling very bad for their pain or the pain of the people that are, around them. I as an empath, I feel that, and I think about it, and I pray for the person, and I pray for the people that they're experiencing. So I am getting involved in this story to a degree that most people don't get involved. But that's me. That's because I have dealt with so much grief in my life. So I guess the story is just be very, very gentle with yourself. Accept your grief. Accept that you are in pain, talk to God, talk to the angels, talk to your guides, talk to your guardian angel, talk to your spiritual team. And just allow yourself to experience the grief. It stinks. It's not an emotion that you really want to go through. Nobody wants to experience it, but we all do. There is nobody who is immune to that pain. If you are alive and you are breathing, you have experienced grief, or you will experience grief, or both. And it is a part of life, just like getting up in the morning and taking a shower. It is something that we experience. And there is nothing that will take that away except time, being compassionate with yourself, reflecting on the relationship, reflecting on life itself, and talking to God and talking to the angels. Seriously. I mean, and obviously, if you are struggling, if you are having a hard time with grief, and you're not feeling fulfilled and satisfied with, talking to family or being on your own, there have been times where I'm a very, very strong person and I have experienced huge amounts of grief, but there have been times in my life where I have wondered if I was going to make it through because the grief was so intense. So I have a tendency to talk to the spiritual realm, God, my guides, but for some people that is not enough. And if you are experiencing that not being enough, please talk to a grief counselor, talk to somebody who deals with this all the time. Don't suffer in silence, but know that if you are out from this grief experience, I mean, you can get 3 months out and you're still suffering from grief. This is normal. It is very normal. I have had people pass my parents. I think when parents pass, you experience grief on a very deep level. If you've lost a child, grief can last a lifetime. You don't want to suffer in silence. You want to talk, and you want to get help if you feel you need it. If you are dealing with it normally and you're feeling as though you are dealing with it well, you will know. Trust your feelings. Trust how you feel about your grief. If you feel like you are dealing with it correctly, then by all means keep doing what you're doing. But if you feel like you are struggling, like you cannot make it through a day because of any form of grief, please seek out a grief counselor. I have never gone to a grief counselor, but I have thought about it several times because I have dealt with some serious, serious grief. I am not you. I believe that I was put in this world to deal with large amounts of grief, both my own and other people's. But I have a strength to me that keeps me, and I have protection. It keeps me where I need to be to deal with grief and to deal with hard life situations. So if you are not in that position and you do not feel like you are maintaining you are struggling, please seek help from a grief counselor. And if you feel like you are maintaining and you're doing pretty well, understand it's going to take time. It's just going to take a period of time for you to heal from this grief. And honestly, I have had grief to the point where I believed while I was going through the grief, I would never heal from it. And I did. I not only healed, but I thrived. And that's a hard one to explain. But you find out things through the grief process about yourself and about the other people. And sometimes once you go through that grief period, you are not the same person. And you actually find that you have learned so much about yourself and so much about the healing process and the grief process that you literally thrive from that experience. I have a video, it's called Bad Things Happen, and that kind of explains the whole thing. We grow, we get stronger, and we thrive and flourish when bad things are happening. Bad things happen to us all, and we just need to remember that some of the greatest people in the world are great because of the challenges and the bad things that have happened to them in their life. So just keep that in mind if you're dealing with grief. Blessings.